Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Courtney Stone, and I'm the Animal Care Manager here at Annenberg PetSpace. We're excited to bring you the latest installment of our Wellness Workshop series. These sessions are designed to help you strengthen the bond between you and your pets through the guidance of experts who explore practical, everyday issues for pet parents. Last year at Annenberg PetSpace, we opened a new section in the building called Critter Corner. This space is designed to introduce guests to the possibility of adopting small companion animals from shelters and local animal care centers. Visitors can meet our 8 ambassador animals, which include a rabbit, cockatiel, California kingsnake, turtle, and more. We're excited to provide a new educational tool to our community to help them find success in adopting, whether it's a dog, cat, or a little critter. To continue in that path, today we welcome Dr. Jessica Robertson, who is a veterinary specialist with VCA West LA Animal Hospital. She'll be sharing her expertise on caring for small mammals, including rabbits, guinea pigs, hamsters, and more. We'll begin with a presentation from Dr. Robertson, who will have time for a Q&A session afterwards. Please hold your questions until then. Now I am pleased to introduce Dr. Jessica Robertson. Upon receiving her doctorate of veterinary medicine from the University of Illinois College of Veterinary Medicine, she completed a rotating internship in small animal medicine and surgery at the university. She then took on a specialty internship in avian, exotic, and zoological medicine at the Oklahoma State University Center for Veterinary Health Sciences. Dr. Robertson completed her residency in zoological companion animal medicine and surgery at the University of California Davis School of Veterinary Medicine in 2019. And following the residency, she joined the team at VCA West LA Animal Hospital. Her special interests include dental disease in small mammals, wound management, and emergency care for companion zoological patients. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Robertson.
Hi guys, I'm super excited to teach you all the things about small mammal husbandry and diet. All of this stuff is very important when it comes to the teeny tiny furry creatures. So hopefully you guys learn a lot of useful information in this presentation. So I'm going to start with bunnies because they are one of the most popular pets out there. They're actually the 3rd most popular pet after dogs and cats. They do have an extended lifespan, very similar to dogs and cats, of about 8 to 12 years. This can vary by breed, with our teeny tiny Netherlands tending to have a higher lifespan than some of our bigger bunnies like the Flemish giants. You would consider them to be crepuscular. So if you're a morning and evening person, this is the best pet to have. They tend to be pretty active at dawn and dusk, and they're very, very social critters. As you can see, this bunny Wally, he's kind of internet famous. He travels a lot and does a lot of very social things. He's very cute. So when we're going to talk about husbandry kind of encompasses where these animals live. And then obviously nutrition is how do you feed them? And this is very different from a typical dog or cat. They need a lot more things associated with their environment, as well as their diet is pretty diverse. And while we have great opportunities in the pet store to purchase some commercially available things, we definitely need to round this out with other more appropriate items to make sure that they're as happy and healthy as possible. So when housing bunnies, have to make sure that you're doing something that is solid bottom. We don't want any wire bottom cages, anything that can lead to those pressure sores that they get. We absolutely don't like anything that's a glass aquarium or anything that's completely enclosed. Bunnies can suffer from some respiratory issues, and certainly anything that can lead to increased dust or environmental irritants can definitely make that worse. When we're talking about sizing, the minimum size for a bunny should be about 3 times their full adult length. So when they lay out or stretch out, you want to make sure you have at least 3 times that size. You can absolutely litter box train them. Bunnies are actually very fastidious, and they really do well with litter box training. And then obviously cleaning and disinfecting the area is very important. A lot of the pet safe cleaners are typically what I recommend, something that's enzymatic, especially when you're initially starting to litter box train them, as bunny pee can definitely be a little bit pungent. When we're talking about substrates, again, bunnies don't need a lot of substrates. You can use this mostly in their litter box. A lot of times I recommend that if they're going to be in a X pen or a cage, you can use something like towels, blankets. You can absolutely use some of the paper bedding. Those are actually the best, most recommended bedding. You don't want to use things like clay litter or clumping litter, anything like that. If it is ingested, it can cause problems. And then the wood shavings, while they do hide some of that smell from the urine, they definitely, the aromatics of the wood shavings can definitely cause some respiratory and skin issues. So we try to recommend staying away from those things and focusing mostly on the paper bedding. So Carefresh is a really big popular brand that I like to recommend, or Oxbow, which is a very big small mammal company. They have their own branded litters as well. Now, certainly everyone thinks about bunnies as being indoor house bunnies, and that certainly is something that we see quite frequently. But in climates like LA, where you have pretty nice weather all year round, there are definitely bunnies that are housed outdoors. One of the biggest things that you want to make sure is that they have adequate ventilation. If it does get hot, you want to make sure that they have some nice shaded areas. And here it's not such an important thing, but certainly where I came from initially in the Midwest, making sure that they're protected from anything that's really windy or cold. And then the big problem that I see most commonly, and why a lot of outdoor bunnies are brought to me, is actually due to the fact that predators can get at them. So making sure that if you have fencing, it's tiny enough that little raccoon paws can't fit through, because that's one of the biggest problems we see with outdoor bunnies. And also making sure that if they're not in a commercially made hutch and you're making something at home, that you actually dig the fencing into the ground so that way predators can't dig under it either. Bunnies, while we think that, you know, they're cage animals, they're tiny critters, they actually need a lot of exercise, and they need a lot of environmental enrichment. So, you know, this bunny in the picture here is living her best life. She's got a lot of stuff going on there, definitely a lot of things that are enriching and keep her busy. And this is really important because one of the biggest problems I see are bunnies that are a little bit chunky and overweight. And certainly preventing this is really important because chunky bunnies can have a few health problems that we want to try to avoid. So keeping them engaged mentally and physically is going to be really important. Making sure that they have daily exercise is what I recommend. Now, a lot of bunnies, I say, you know, if they're good bunnies, they don't destroy a lot of things. Again, they like chewing. You can keep them out in a room and they don't necessarily have to be in a cage. That will help them be exercising. Or you can kind of bunny proof an area, a larger area for them. Amazon has a lot of really nice cord protectors, and you can make screen fencing and stuff for your walls and protect your baseboards. And that will allow your bunny to get out and roam and explore. So we're going to kind of transition into diets, and everyone thinks that, you know, they see Bugs Bunny eating the carrots and that's something that, you know, bunnies need a lot of. It's actually not a great staple diet for them. The most important thing that bunnies need is fiber. So if you think about them running around out in the fields, they're eating lots of dried grasses, bushes, things like that. A lot of what we're going to offer them in the captive pet setting is a lot of very luscious homegrown veggies, those carrots that Bugs Bunny likes. So we really want to make sure that we're feeding them a large portion of grass hay. And grass hay is going to be really important for our adult bunnies. So these are bunnies that are older than about 8 to 9 months. And grass hays are some of the examples listed in the pictures. So your Timothy hay, which everyone is very knowledgeable about, but there are also other options, including oat hays, botanical hays, orchard grass, and all of these different hays, they have different textures. So they have different kind of sweetness to them as well. And so some bunnies will dislike Timothy hay, but they'll love oat hay. So offering a variety is really important. And in some of our younger kiddos, so the bunnies that are less than 8 to 9 months of age, this is when you want to feed them their alfalfa hay. Or say you have a bunny that maybe is pregnant and going to have babies or nursing babies, or sometimes older bunnies that just aren't able to keep weight on, that is another time where using alfalfa hay can be really helpful. What I find is that adult bunnies really like alfalfa hay because it's super tasty. It's almost like eating a Snickers bar in comparison to eating a salad. And so a lot of owners will really want to continue to feed the alfalfa hay because they just love it so much. But that can actually create a lot of issues in them and can lead to the buildup of calcium in their body, which can predispose them to bladder stones. And so to help offset that risk, we really recommend that alfalfa hay is not used after they're adults. I also listed here a lot of dark leafy greens. This should be another big mainstay of what we're feeding them. So a big chunk of it is hay. They should have that available at all times. And then I typically say dark leafy greens, about 2 cups per 5 pounds of bunny a day. And you can give them a wide variety. So, I typically say shop in season, shop whatever is on sale, and give them a wide variety. There's lots of information out there about the dangers of feeding some of the greens that are higher in calcium or higher in oxalates. And you'll see a lot of stuff if you Dr. Google them. But the big important thing is that if you're feeding a variety, you are not going to over feed them something like calcium. And actually feeding alfalfa hay is way more concerning when we talk about calcium than a lot of the dark leafy greens listed here. And then we have the pellets. So pellets are great. Pellets are definitely important in those young baby bunnies. We want them to grow, we want them to form good bone structure, have healthy coats, form a nice fat layer and muscling. But what we don't want them to continue to do is get chunky as they get into their adult size. And pellets were initially made for bunnies that were meant for more production and not necessarily for our pet bunnies. And so without having the longevity with production bunnies, the pellets are really something that they don't need, but certainly something that you can offer. I usually say less than 5% of their diet. And what I really recommend doing with pellet feeding is to get a puzzle type feeder or some type of active feeding device to really help engage their mind and give them something to work for this really tasty treat. Again, the bunnies that are kind of babies growing, anything less than 8 to 9 months can definitely get these. And then all of the really fun seed cereal pellet mixes that you see in the pet store, those are actually really bad for bunnies. All of those seeds are actually very dangerous for them to eat. And so we absolutely want to stay away from those, even though they're marketed to bunnies and later we'll say guinea pigs and all of that. So staying away from that is going to be really important. So all the things to avoid: big, giant, circular red X. The worry is that because our bunnies are meant to eat lots of fiber, they have a lot of friendly bacteria in their GI tract. And when you feed those bacteria a lot of sugars, a lot of carbohydrates, they actually can kind of grow out of control, and they can create, as a lot of bunny owners are aware of, GI stasis, that increased gas within the GI. That's very painful and uncomfortable for bunnies. And then they stop eating entirely. They'll stop pooping sometimes. And this is one of the biggest issues, is an excessive amount of kind of treat-like items. So my own personal bunny, he doesn't see any of these things. I'm also mean. He doesn't see any pellets either. So we pick his favorite greens for treat-like items. So he loves mint, he loves dill. So those are the things that he gets as special little treats. And it's a much healthier thing for them. And then enrichment. Enrichment is great. And enrichment doesn't have to be the big fancy, puzzle feeder toys or anything like that. As I'm sure a lot of bunny owners know, sometimes the most exciting thing is the cardboard box that your Amazon delivery comes in. So a lot of times I say, use what you have at home, toilet paper rolls, paper towel rolls, filling them with hay, again, filling them with some of those pellets, and then giving them to bunnies. Cardboard boxes, again, are one of the biggest fun things. You can make little castles for them. And then they have all the commercially available toys as well. A lot of the hay-based toys you can definitely use. And then these kiddos are social. So having a relationship with them, having them bond with you as their human, as well as considering pair bonding them, can be really important. Obviously, we want spayed and neutered bunnies that are bonded together because we know we don't need any more bunnies in the world. But having their bonded mate can definitely help with environmental stimulation. And then bunnies can actually be trained. So I'm working with my bunny right now. I'm sure lots of people see the buttons for the dogs and cats. So my bunny is learning how to talk with buttons. We'll see if it goes well, but he's a smart kiddo, so I have faith in him. So guinea pigs are a growing animal that people are loving to get. These guys are, rodents, unlike bunnies. And so one of the things about these kiddos is that they, again, are very crepuscular. They are social, and they live about 5 to 7 years. So they are, again, another commitment. They have very similar housing requirements as bunnies. The nice thing is that most of the time when you're doing caging for them, there's a lot of ideas through Pinterest and online of how to create nice enclosures for them that are much larger than the commercially available ones. And there's lots of recommendations of how to make them safe. A couple of the examples are in the pictures. So getting the shelving, the metal shelving, and using that to create a nice enclosure for them, and then using foam padding or tarp at the bottom to keep everything contained, and then using some type of substrate or hay for them to kind of bury around in. They do tend to like to be socially housed. However, I will say boys don't always get along. So something to keep in mind when you're getting a couple of guinea pigs is that females tend to bond pretty well. And if you have spayed and neuter male and female guinea pigs, they also tend to get along pretty well. And one of the great things about guinea pigs is that fleece makes an excellent substrate for them. And it's really nice because you can put pea pads or some of the paper-based litters underneath, and it makes cleaning up really easy. And it's eco-friendly, they're reusable, washable, and there have been a lot of people that have made great Etsy businesses out of this. So they make really cute fleece liners, so you can have them themed. It's really great. And so if you have kids too, it's something that really gets them engaged and can help with cleaning of cages, because kids get really excited about being able to change fleece, especially if they're like superheroes and stuff like that. So always a recommendation. Staying away from the wood shavings, all the clay, cat litters, all the same things that we chatted about with bunnies is really recommended to them, because if they ingest that clay litter, that can cause a lot of problems. And those wood shavings can lead to a lot of irritation, both to their respiratory tract and, again, their skin. So their diet is very, very similar to bunnies. However, the big difference is that they actually should have pellets, and this should be a regular part of their diet. And the biggest reason is that, just like people, guinea pigs can't form vitamin C, and vitamin C is very important for your teeth. It's very important for your joints. If you think about pirates that used to have really poor diets, and you've ever heard of scurvy, that's low vitamin C, and guinea pigs can also experience that as well. So it's really important that they get their pellets and that they get a good source of vitamin C. I actually recommend giving them additional sources of vitamin C. The reason being is that vitamin C in the pellets is only good for about 90 days after you've opened that bag. And a lot of times the larger bags aren't used up in that period of time. And so that vitamin C over time is no longer available in those pellets. So offering it in some other form is really important. So there Lots of other forms. I tell a lot of clients of mine to get the Oxbow Hay Tabs. Guinea pigs take them like treats. They love them. They get super excited and they squeak for them. And it's super easy. 1 tablet a day is plenty of vitamin C for them. You can also utilize some of the liquids that you give directly to the guinea pigs. The important thing to remember is that vitamin C in the water is fancy water, because as soon as that vitamin C sees light, it automatically breaks down and it is no longer available to them. And so they're actually not getting that vitamin C. And sometimes it can actually alter the taste of the water. And so we do see some guinea pigs avoid their water bottles completely because of the taste of the vitamin C. So giving it to them in a hay tab is definitely much better than putting it in their water bottle. And then again, big giant red X, all the things that we want to avoid, all of those fun things that you see in the pet store that are directed directly at you that look so fun. So all the cereal mixes, all of the seeds, all of the yogi drops, everything that looks exciting. Again, these animals have the need to digest a lot of fiber. And when we start giving them lots of sugars, just like the bunnies, their GI tract gets really unhappy, can form a lot of gases, and then they get GI stasis, very similar to bunnies. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind and utilize some of those greens. Or in guinea pigs, they can have a little bit more kind of other veggie items such as tomatoes or bell pepper, cucumbers as treat items. Environmental enrichment. There are lots of toys out there that are geared towards guinea pigs. They can hang on the side of the cages, things that you can put in there, things that they can shred and destroy. But just like with bunnies, you can use a lot of the stuff that you already have in your house. So cardboard boxes, paper towel rolls, anything that they can shred is also something that they love to do. As you can see, that guinea pig in the bottom is destroying a paper bag and was probably more excited about that than any of the fancy toys that you ever buy. I don't know about anyone else, but that's what my kiddos always like, the box and not the toy. So I've learned. Now I just get them boxes. All right. So chinchillas. Chinchillas make great pets if you like entertainment and you like watching critters be adorable and cute. However, they are not a good pet idea for kids or someone that wants a pet that's super snuggly. These guys are a little bit bouncy, they're a little bit crazy, and they are not snugglers. They also, being rodents, these guys, as opposed to that dawn and dusk type schedule, they're a little bit more nocturnal. So again, not a good idea to keep these animals in a bedroom with a kid because they're probably going to be up all night running around on a wheel. And we don't want any kids being kept up all night. And they have a really long lifespan. So that's something a lot of people don't realize, that chinchillas can live 15 to 20 years plus. And so they are a pretty long commitment when we're talking about our small furry mammals. Caging for them or housing for them, solid bottoms. The nice thing is that there are a lot of commercially available cages for chinchillas that are adequate in size. The reason being is that they tend to be more vertical space users as opposed to guinea pigs that are more kind of horizontal space animals. And so they can have these multiple level, multiple shelf type situations. One of the most important things is that they love to chew. So they will chew anything and everything you put in there. So the cage on the picture, you can see all of the wood shelving. You should anticipate that you're probably going to have to replace that throughout the lifetime of your kiddos, but it gives them something to do. It's great enrichment for them and can help with their dental health. The important thing to remember about chinchillas is that they actually originally come from the Andes, where it's chilly and cold. And so they're very, very sensitive to heat. So I always recommend people that have chinchillas, make sure that you're living in a place, if it's really hot, that you have air conditioning, or you're going to have fans, because anything really hotter than about 80 degrees can cause some really serious issues for them. So making sure that we're keeping a close eye on that is going to be important. Chinchillas also love dust baths. It is a requirement for them. They do have a lot of oils, and because their fur is so thin and fine and very fluffy, this is why they're so soft, they do require this dust to help absorb some of those oils and help keep their fur beautiful and pristine. There are lots of commercial dusts available. It's usually a mix of kind of diatomaceous earth and silver sands. And there are lots of really cute dust houses, and they look adorable while dust bathing. This is not something that they should have offered to them at all times. This is something that you should have a separate little carrier house for them, or put it in their big cage a couple of times a week, because if you leave it in there all the time and they're using it excessively, it can cause some irritation to their eyes, and we definitely don't want that. So making sure that you're kind of on a schedule for their dust baths is going to be important. So because they are nocturnal, they do a lot of their eating and exercising at night. So it's really important when you're thinking about feeding them that absolutely I always recommend checking on them in the morning, offering morning and evening food. But you may notice that during the day, they're not really wanting to take any of the things that you offer. And that's not uncommon. And so making sure that you're giving them enough food overnight is going to be really important. And their diet is very similar to that of the bunnies and the guinea pigs. They are an animal, again, that can have pellets. They're specifically manufactured chinchilla pellets, and the reason being is that they actually use their little front feet to hold on to things while they eat. And those pellets that are made for chinchillas are actually much longer, so they're easier for them to hold. The makeup of the pellet is exactly the same as bunny pellets, but they're able to hold them and eat them much, much easier. So things to avoid: no Doritos in chinchillas, but also no seeds or any of those fun things that the pet store wants you to buy. Again, they have that GI tract that's meant for that fiber. If we think about where they live in the Andes up on these cliffs, and there's lots of brush and dried grass, but there isn't a lot of luscious fruits and yogurt or Doritos. So making sure that we're feeding them all of the things that are meant to keep their GI tract healthy so they don't get that gas formation, GI pain, and GI stasis is really important. They are very social as well, and they do very well co-housing. Typically, you can keep same-sex pairs together, although some boys will fight, so something to keep in mind. And obviously, if they're spayed or neutered, you can absolutely have boys and girls together. As opposed to bunnies and guinea pigs, they actually really enjoy the commercially available wheels. So getting them one of the saucer spins or one of the big wheels is very nice. They will run on it all night. Another reason why they shouldn't be in a room with kids. The most important thing is to make sure that the wheels or the saucer spinners are solid. They are not wire, they don't have little holes in them. I've seen a lot of injuries to toes and legs because they get so excited and they run so fast and their little feet get stuck, and they can definitely have some injuries. So making sure anything you get is a solid plastic or metal surface. Okay, I've lumped all of the mice, hamsters, gerbils, and rats together. Reason being is that they're very, very similar. In the state of California, gerbils are actually illegal to own, which makes me very sad because they're one of my favorites. But unfortunately, they are not allowed here. Depending on the kiddo that you're looking at, mice typically lifespan a year, year and a half. Rats, maybe 2.5 years. Again, hamsters are very similar to the mice, and gerbils tend to live a little bit longer. These kiddos are definitely nocturnal. I remember the first pair of gerbils I ever got, I was a 7-year-old kid. I was so excited. I wanted them to sleep right next to me. And that lasted for about a day because I was so cranky because I was up all night. My mom couldn't stand me. So they had to sleep in a different room. So definitely they are very, very nocturnal. They also are pretty popular because of the inexpensiveness to purchase them, but that doesn't mean that they don't deserve the same TLC and love and care. And they actually can make really great pets with their people. Certainly when I see them in hospital, they're less excited to see me, but they can be very, very great with their owners. So there are lots of commercially available cages. One of the most important things to remember is that it needs to be escape proof and chew proof. So I have seen many a hamster escape something that is plastic that is commercially available for them. They chew through anything. So I typically recommend something that's a little bit thicker plastic with the wire caging for hamsters. They definitely are little escape artists. I worry less about rats. Rats don't tend to chew to escape as much, but they certainly can. But making sure that you're giving them a good, safe place that they can't escape from is going to be really important. And then as opposed to rabbits and guinea pigs, these kiddos really like a lot of hiding and nesting places. So using the paper bedding, really thick paper bedding, paper towels, Kleenexes, even sometimes the commercially available little pouches and hides and tunnels. Rats really love sleeping in those. They have the little hammocks. All of those are really great for them. They really enjoy them. As you can see here, this little hammy, a lot of times when hamsters come in, I look in a cage and I say, where's the hamster? There's so much fluff in here. That's what they love. So they should really have a deep area that they can burrow in. They like to stash their food so they can hide their food and really have a good enriching environment for them is important. And just like with all the kiddos we've talked about, keeping away from those wood shavings, which are definitely marketed more for hamsters and rats, is going to be really important, especially in our rats, because they are so predisposed to respiratory disease, is really, really important. Now, these kiddos are more omnivorous. So when we were talking about our bunnies and our guinea pigs, our chinchillas, they were herbivores. They were total plant eaters. Hamsters, rats, they tend to consume some other food items out in the wild. Now, we definitely don't want to be feeding our rats any, chicken or turkey or anything like that, but it is important that they have higher protein. And so this is why the pelleted diet is so important, because it accounts for the fact that they are meant to eat some animal protein as well as fruits and veggies. And then certainly supplementing with greens and fruits and hay is also very enriching for them. As you can see, that little ratty with the pea, he's super cute. He's so excited. And that's a really healthy treat or snack for them. Enrichment. You can use enrichment for them just as you would for a bunny or a guinea pig. I see a lot of hamsters that come in a little bit chunky, so making sure that they get good exercise. Because they tend to live in smaller cages, I do recommend that, taking them out minimally a couple times a week, ideally daily, is going to be important. It's nice because they do have these little plastic balls where they can run freely, but still be safe and confined and get a little bit of exercise and exploring. And the same thing holds true for any of the wheels or climbing devices for them. You want to make sure that they're nice and solid. There's no areas where they can get their little toes or their little legs trapped. And again, using a lot of vertical spaces. So they do like to climb, caging with the plastic tubing that goes to the multiple levels and changing that around to give them a new environment. Some hamsters get really crabby about it and they hate cage changing day, but others get really excited and they run around and they're really excited to explore the new environment. So ferrets, I love ferrets. I think ferrets are permanent kittens always. They are crazy. They are troublemakers. But they also, unfortunately, are illegal in California. And it's one of the saddest things for me being here is that I don't get to see them in practice nearly as much as I used to. They have a reported lifespan of about 5 to 8 years, but unfortunately, I do think that most of them do end up not living to the high end of that. And it's just because of the fact that they are very inbred coming from one breeder, and they do have a lot of diseases that unfortunately become very difficult to manage later on in life. And so knowing those things can be really important. They are very, very social. They are very, very active. They get into everything. So they will get into your couches and your chairs and everywhere in your house. So definitely making sure that you have ferret proofed your house or the room that they're going to be in is really important. And these guys sleep for very, very, very long hours. So they get these very short bursts of energy where they run around like crazy and then they crash, and they can crash for hours and then they do it again. And so it's really important to recognize that that's a very normal behavior, and that they're not sick or not feeling well. They just like really long siestas. So caging, they have very nice commercially available ferret cages. Making sure that they're chew proof and escape proof is important. You can litter box train them. Most ferrets will pick a corner of their cage to use as kind of their elimination area. And so you can use that to your advantage and litter box train them. One of the most important things is that ferrets, they do like to chew on the wire caging, and so they can break their teeth. So trying to make sure that their environment is enriching or using wiring that is close enough together and small enough that they can't get their little jaws around it is really important, because we definitely don't want them breaking their teeth on those things. They also love burying themselves. They love snuggling in pouches and blankets and towels. They also love jumping into boxes that are full of packing peanuts and all of those types of things. So utilizing a lot of the commercially available stuff is really important. Making sure that you have a good substrate in your litter box, not using any of the cat litters or any of the wood-based beddings, but more of the paper-based is really important for them as well. So ferrets are carnivores, meaning that they eat whole prey. And so in captivity, we tend to feed them a pelleted diet. And certainly when you go to the store and, you know, you're thinking about what you're going to feed your ferret, you definitely don't think about picking up frozen mice and feeding that, but that's actually a much better diet for ferrets than even the commercially available kibble. And so if you ever come to see me with a ferret, I will recommend a whole prey diet. And the reason being is that one of the diseases that ferrets get, which is a disease of decreasing blood sugar that can become very life-threatening, has been shown to be correlated with diet. And so if we can get them eating more protein, more fat, like they would in the wild, we have seen decreased incidence of this disease. And so that's why even if it's only whole prey a few times a week and we're supplementing with pelleted diet, it's really important to try to get these kiddos to get some whole prey. And then kitten food, cat food, it doesn't have, even though cats are also carnivores, it doesn't have the level of protein that they need. And so again, they won't be as healthy as they can be if that's what they're getting as food. They are very, very social. They love lots of activities. There are lots of harnesses, leashes. You can take them outside. Make sure that they are vaccinated. That's a really important thing to remember. They can get some of the same diseases as our dogs. So they can get distemper, they can get rabies, and so they should be vaccinated. But they definitely love to explore, and using things at home that you already have, cardboard boxes, all of those things. I also find that cat toys are really useful for them. So a lot of the cat balls and tunnels, you can utilize those in ferrets, and they can also be trained to, do different tricks or run through different tunnels. I even had one owner that did agility with her ferret, which was adorable, and she had lots of videos. So they definitely do enjoy bonding with their people as well as each other. And one thing that I have learned is that once you get a ferret, you start collecting ferrets and you never go back. So they can make wonderful, wonderful pets. Moving on to our little Hedgies. These definitely are a popular kiddo, more in the Midwest, because unfortunately they again are illegal in California. California does not like the small, tiny creatures. They have, again, a reported lifespan of about 4 to 7 years, but I will say because of their very small population, they unfortunately get a lot of cancers and they do pass away at a young age. So something to keep in mind when you're thinking about getting a Hedgie. They are also nocturnal. And so making sure that they're not sleeping in a kid's bedroom or, in an area where you're going to be kept up all night. As opposed to a lot of the other animals that I talked about today, they are solitary. They do not like friends. And so keeping that in mind is really important. So when they're young and babies, they can definitely be co-housed, but once they start maturing, they need their own separate spaces. And it's really interesting, but Hedgies, you wouldn't think about it, they actually are very good climbers. So making sure that they have a solid bottom, single level, tall enclosure is really important. People have thought that, their little Hedgies, their little teeny tiny short legs, they're not going to be able to climb out of a shallow enclosure. It's actually not true. So the top of this caging in this picture is actually something that this little kiddo could jump right out of and definitely get lost in a household. So making sure that you recognize that they're very good climbers is important. They actually also undergo this phenomenon known as brumation or hibernation. We actually don't want to do that to them. If they get too chilly, they will kind of become really sleepy. They don't want to eat. That's not something that we want these animals to do when they're pets. But it is something that they will do if they aren't kept warm. So a lot of times if you're living in an area where it gets a little bit cooler, having a little bit of a heating blanket underneath their cage, making sure that you're checking temperatures can become really important. Hedgehogs are what we consider insectivores, which means they eat a lot of different bugs. And then they also do like some veggies. There are some commercially available kibble diets for them. I will say that I think we still have a little ways to go on them. Sometimes they're not super palatable to some of these little Hedgies, and so it can be hard to get them to eat. And hedgehogs will form not necessarily food aversion, but they are very particular about what they eat. And so it's very hard as a juvenile or as an adult to try to get them to eat something new. They just don't want to. And then because all of the bugs that we keep as far as feeding to our pets, they are very devoid of calcium. Calcium is very important for your heart to work normally, your bones to be nice and healthy, muscle movements. When we're feeding bugs, they should always be supplemented with calcium. And so there's lots of commercially available calcium supplements, calcium powders. You can find them in the reptile section, typically in most pet stores. Or you can, what we say, gut load those animals, so feeding them things that are high in calcium. There's actually cricket food out there that is very high in calcium, feeding them a lot of dark leafy greens that are higher in calcium. Those are some of the things that you can do. Not everyone wants to have a colony of bugs that they feed, which is understandable. So dusting is also acceptable. And a lot of Owners will also feed cat food because it's a recommendation online a lot. And again, that's not something that we want to do. It can lead to obesity. And we definitely don't want these Hedgies to be chunky. So making sure that we avoid cat food is really important. They also can have a lot of different environmental enrichment items. They also really do like the spinners and the wheels, making sure that they're nice and solid. They do well with the cat toys, as you can see in the picture, the little cat balls that they can throw and toss around. Giving them some time out of their cage to run around can be really important. And hedgehogs can be very, very social with their owners. So they can form really good bonds with the people that are their family. So they can be really great to interact with. The last set of little tiny creatures that I'm going to talk about are sugar gliders. I ended with everything that is illegal in California. So sugar gliders are also illegal in the state of California. They are very cool kiddos. They're arboreal. They glide with their little arm and leg membranes. And they tend to do very well in group housing. Actually, neutering boy chinchillas is a very easy procedure, and they do quite well with it. So you can co-house a lot of sugar gliders together. They actually do quite well in groups, and they do have a long lifespan. So they can live about 10 to 15 years as well. So you can see in this picture, this is the ritziest sugar glider enclosure ever. Lots of toys, lots of hiding areas, lots of places for them to explore and sleep. Wire caging for nice ventilation, very important. And just like we were talking about with our chinchillas, they use a lot of vertical spacing. Spacing for them to glide and climb is their main methods of kind of moving around their cage. And they also, because they're nocturnal, they really do like hiding. And so those commercially available pouches are really nice to have hanging. And even some people, when they initially get their sugar gliders to form their bond, they have the pouches that you can kind of wear to really kind of bond with them. And then it makes it easy for travel to the vet or things like that. We don't know a lot about sugar glider diets. This is something that we are still working on. And we look at what they eat in the wild. They drink sap from trees. They get nectar and pollen from flowers. They eat some insects and spiders. So in captivity, a lot of what we recommend is basically called a modified leadbeater or leadbeater diet. This is a diet of supplements and fruits and veggies, protein, usually egg, some sweetness, honey. You can use the leadbeater website. It'll give you a nice recipe. It is nice and convenient because you make it, you put it in the freezer, you thaw out little like ice cube tray size for them. Recently, they've also created some pelleted diets for sugar gliders. Again, I think we have some place to grow. When we're talking about commercially available diets, it can be difficult to get them to eat the pelleted diets, and I think that might be secondary to some of the palatability. But it's always something that I do recommend offering. And just like with hedgehogs, you can feed them some insects, making sure that you supplement them with calcium. And sugar gliders of any of our small mammals can develop low body calcium, and they can have changes to their bones. They can actually have an inability to move if they don't get enough calcium. So supplementing any of the bugs that you're feeding is really important to make sure that they're getting enough calcium to be nice and healthy. Their main method of kind of moving throughout their cage is gliding, just like in the picture you see there. So it is really important to have lots of that, what we call arboreal or vertical spacing, so they can do this natural mobility. And then group housing is the most important thing for them as well. They really do enjoy being group housed. And neutering the boys is quite easy, so you can keep groups of them together. And then kind of what I talked about a little bit earlier, they do have the pouches for bonding with their human owners, and a lot of people will use that as an enriching thing for them as well. So that is what I have for everyone as far as husbandry things. And I would be happy to take any specific questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. We're now going to open up for some questions. So feel free to either use the Q&A function to submit your question or the chat function. We did have a couple questions come up during your talk about guinea pigs. We had quite a few questions about guinea pigs. I know they're very popular right now as well.
They are.
They are. So first question is if guinea pigs should be adopted in pairs or groups rather than as a single.
So I do recommend if they are adults and being adopted and they are already known to be a pair bonded group, to take them together, because those are individuals that get along, have that social dynamic. What I will say is that if you get two adult guinea pigs that are not bonded, you can always try introductions in a neutral territory and see if they get along. But just like every person doesn't get along with every person, every guinea pig may not get along with every guinea pig. And so it may take some trial and error. And some guinea pigs just like to be housed by themselves. And that's okay too. And they tend to be more social with their people.
Great, thank you. So another question came in about if you can litter train your guinea pig.
So some people actually report that you can. And guinea pigs do also tend to use certain areas of their cage. What you may notice is that you have to have a couple of areas for them as far as litter training. And they don't seem to have the same level of recall as a rabbit or a ferret. So litter box training them in a smaller space with lots of boxes. But I wouldn't be discouraged if it doesn't take, or if they take a while to get used to it.
Yeah, I can say our two guinea pigs here, they're like partially litter box trained. You know, they'll use it, but they also go elsewhere. But
yep.
for the most part, they use it. Now, you also talked about using a lot of boxes for enrichment, which is a fantastic use of things we already have in the home. Somebody wanted to know if Amazon boxes were safe to be used, or if you know if there are any ingredients in the boxes that were harmful to small mammals.
So not that I am aware of. And what I do recommend is that if they have any of the labeling on them, that you pull as much of that off as possible, because we do know that the printing, the dyes can have some concerns. And I usually pull a lot of the tape off. But I am not aware, and I haven't seen anything reported as far as anything with boxes being toxic.
Fantastic, thank you. We also had a couple questions about some hamsters, and kind of a two-part question. One, if you can litter train hamsters, and two, if hamsters can live together, or if, especially if they're from a different family.
Yeah, so you can attempt, I usually say the same thing as guinea pigs. So hamsters do tend to like to use certain corners in their cage. And so if you can identify those, you can definitely place little litter boxes there. But I wouldn't be too discouraged if it doesn't seem like a consistent thing, but definitely can help with cage cleaning. And that's actually a really good point with hamsters. Unfortunately, hamsters are not social kiddos. They are very much like hedgehogs. And so I actually do not recommend housing them together. Same with mice, unfortunately. Sometimes mice, they do get along, but sometimes they don't get along. So if you do buy more than one, I would anticipate having separate cages for them for their own health and welfare.
Fantastic. And we had another question about hamsters. Hamsters are also popular. Can you bathe a hamster?
So we don't actually recommend bathing hamsters. One thing is that certainly they're teeny tiny little creatures. And even if you try your best to keep them warm after they get bathed, they are very predisposed to getting a very low body temperature, which can be dangerous for them. Some hamsters, they might be a little messy. They can, sometimes kind of crawl in their own urine and stuff like that. One of the things that I recommend that's safe is the hypoallergenic unscented baby wipes is a very safe way to kind of clean them up, but not put them at risk for being very wet or very cold. So that's typically what I recommend. And that goes for animals other than hamsters. You can use them in bunnies, guinea pigs, all of that.
Great. Would you recommend sand or dust baths for hamsters?
I don't typically for hamsters. So hamsters don't necessarily need them. Hamsters need good areas to kind of dig and bury and form their little nest. The other animals that I do recommend dust baths for are actually gerbils. They do need some dust baths. And then I didn't talk about them too much also because they're illegal, but dagoos, they also like dust baths as well.
Great, thank you. And since we talked about a few pets that are nocturnal, would you recommend that those nocturnal pets be kept in a dark room at night?
So they definitely can be. So what you will see is that they tend to sleep most of the time during the day. However, if you keep them in an area where there's less light or it's dark and you can kind of flip their day-night cycle, that's something that you can do, but they should have access to some darkness. So if you're going to have them be light during the day and dark at night, they should absolutely be kept in a dark room.
Thank you. Now going back to guinea pigs, we had somebody ask about if you had any positive or negative thoughts on providing vitamin D to guinea pigs via lamps.
Yeah, so there has been some research and some work out there about offering vitamin D. And so one of the things that we know in guinea pigs is that the information is a little bit inconclusive as opposed to bunnies. Bunnies, it was a little bit more positive pro towards providing them UVB and vitamin D that way. What I will say is that you can absolutely offer it as long as you are following manufacturer instructions, because it's not going to hurt them as long as the lights are hung in an area where they can't chew on the cords, obviously, and that they're high enough, because one of the biggest things that we see that can be dangerous with those lights is actually eye injuries. And so making sure that you look at the box and you see how high they have to be hung above the animal is going to be really important. But the data just isn't as clear in guinea pigs as it is in bunnies.
Very interesting. That was something new I learned tonight, so thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now for hamsters, they can be prone to wet tail. We had somebody ask if you could talk a little bit more about that, and also if guinea pigs could also get wet tail.
Yeah, so wet tail is something that is basically an overgrowth of a specific bacteria. So the bacteria is Lawsonia. It is something that hamsters are very prone to getting. And so certainly if you see loose poop or a really messy bum, getting them to a veterinarian is going to be the most important thing, because if we don't treat that bacteria, it's going to continue to grow in their GI tract and they'll get really dehydrated and sick. And some kiddos can unfortunately pass away from it. What I will say is that this disease is something that I definitely still see in hamsters, and I do treat relatively regularly. And it's because most of the time they're acquired from large breeding facilities and then put in pet stores, and they are housed together in pet stores and they kind of give it to each other. I don't see it as commonly in guinea pigs, but certainly guinea pigs can develop Lawsonia. They can also get other dysbioses that actually cause loosening of the stool, and most of the time that's secondary to GI stasis and then what we call bacterial translocation. So that means that bacteria that live in a certain part of the gut start moving elsewhere, and that can mess up their fiber digestion. And that's actually more problematic. And so making sure, again, that they're seen by a vet so we can get them on the right medications is really important, because not all guinea pigs need to be treated with antibiotics as opposed to hamsters.
Great, thank you. I think we've got two more quick questions because I know we're almost running out of time. We had someone ask if hamsters are able to swim.
So I wouldn't recommend it. I have had a few clients that have taken their hamsters in their pool and they have like their own little hamster floaties and things like that. Um, they weren't really meant to swim. Now, certainly bunnies, on the other hand, will swim for fun, which is very interesting. But I don't recommend it for hamsters. And again, part of the reason is that they are so prone to getting too cold, and that can make them very sick.
I think we have a new enrichment for our rabbit that we have here to see if he likes swimming. I had no idea that rabbits could swim, so
Yeah.
thank you.
It's great. Like, you should Google it, actually. There's lots of videos.
I will. So last question for the evening was, somebody was wondering if what the best diets for mice are.
So just like the rats, the block pellets is actually the best diet for them because that is a full, complete, nutritionally balanced. And while this isn't always necessarily a good thing, it is a good thing in the sense that mice and rats are used in research. And so we do know a lot about their dietary requirements. And so using that pellet is important, but you can also supplement with things like fruits and veggies at home just to give them something new to try. But the pellets are really important for them.
Great. And so that was our last question. Thank you to everyone for submitting your questions. They were amazing, and I definitely learned quite a few new things today. So thank you, Dr. Robertson.
Of course.
As we wrap things up, just a quick reminder that Annenberg PetSpace is currently open to offering dog and cat adoptions on a first come, first served basis. We're also welcoming guests to visit our new Critter Corner area to learn more about small companion animals and see how they can make great pets as well. And finally, you're invited to one of our special upcoming events at Annenberg PetSpace. If you like critters, creepy and crawly, don't miss our Halloween event on Saturday, October 30th. You'll have a fun fur raising activities and tasty treats for the entire family, including any canine companions. You can register now at annenbergpetspace.org. And thank you again to Dr. Robertson for taking the time to share this great information with us. And thank you all to all of our viewers for joining and asking all of your wonderful questions and continuing to support Wallace Annenberg PetSpace. And have a great night. And thank you again, Dr. Robertson.